In our app, MyPadWorld for the iPad, we need now to add the code that connects the interface elements we're going to put into the modal view, which are the speed slider and the text entry field. We've got to connect them to the method that changes the speed and enters the replacement text, the view controller for the modal view. As you recall with MyPadWorld, the idea is to enable the user to enter his or her own words for the falling words animation, as well as change the speed of the animation. We're building a modal view, a child window, such as a dialog in Mac OS X or something, that appears on top of the parent window, which is the main view. And a characteristic of a modal view is that it requires the user to interact with it before returning to the parent window. Now here we are in MyPadWorld, and here is the main view. This is the parent window, and the modal view is a child window that will appear on top. Now we've created the bare bones view controller for this modal view called Settings View Controller, and we have the header file here and the implementation file here. And these were created directly from UI View Controller. All we had to do is select it, and this code was generated. It also generated this blank nib file, which has basically an iPad status bar at the top. This will become our modal view. So in our modal view, we want the user to be able to enter the text to replace the existing text for these falling words, and to drag a speed slider for the speed of the animation. The user should then be able to tap a Done button to gracefully exit the modal view. Remember, a modal view should not be like a mini application within your application. You want to avoid creating a modal task that involves a hierarchy of modal views, as you see on the left, which is one of my favorite humorous takes on modal views. Because people can get lost and forget how to retrace their steps. You may recognize some of these bad examples of modal views. They look very much like the ones in older versions of Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Word. A modal view should provide a bit of self-contained functionality in the context of the current task or workflow. Remember now, a modal view interrupts the workflow. But if the context shift is clear and temporary so that the user doesn't lose sight of the main task, a modal view can be the most agreeable way to offer the ability to change settings. As a design goal, keep tasks in a modal view fairly short and narrowly focused, and always provide an obvious and safe way to exit a modal view, such as we're going to do with a Done button. Now, before using Interface Builder to create these interface elements, which include the speed slider and the text entry field, and these are for the modal view, we should first put outlets in the code that will connect the methods to the Interface Builder interface objects. We need to add code to the Settings View Controller header file, and also to the implementation file, code that will connect to the interface elements and offer the ability to change the speed and enter replacement text. So let's start with the header file. We're using delegation, which you've seen before. It's a design pattern used extensively in the frameworks to customize the behavior of an object without having to subclass it. Instead of having to bother with all that subclassing, one object delegates the task of implementing one of its methods to another object. And to implement a delegated method, we put the code for our application-specific behavior in a separate delegate object. Now what we're going to do is set up the Settings View Controller to provide protocols for the delegate object, which is our MyPadWorld View Controller. And MyPadWorld View Controller can then simply use the methods of this object, Settings View Controller. To do that, we start with an @protocol statement. And then in the interface declaration, we include Settings View Controller delegate as our delegate. And then below the end, we define our protocol methods. Settings View Controller delegate, our methods. Settings View Controller. This is our first method. And this doesn't belong here. Our Settings View Controller. Did finish with change. And that returns a Boolean changed. Our next method for our protocol, change speed to new speed. And we declare a property here, non-atomic, contain, and as string, following words. Now, we still need to create our outlets. The fact that a connection between an interface object and its outlets exists at all is actually stored in a nib file. When the nib file is loaded, each connection is reconstituted and reestablished, thus enabling you to send messages to the object. we use IB outlet as the keyword that tags an instance variable declaration so that the interface builder knows that a particular instance variable is an outlet and can then enable the connection to it with Xcode. So we're going to do that now here in the interface declaration. First, we're going to start with a floating slider value. And then our first IB outlet is the UI text field. And that is assigned to the text field. Now, we just realized while typing this that we haven't yet adopted the UI text field delegate protocols, and we need to do that with UI view controller. So in here, before the actual bracket that starts our methods in our interface declaration, we need to put UI text field delegate so that we adopt those protocols. So in addition to the text field, we want to do an IB outlet for the slider as a UI slider, and that is assigned to slider. And one more IB outlet for a UI label. That will be our slider display. So we've created the outlet that points to the text entry field, and the one that points to the speed slider, and the one that points to the label, which is slider display. We've declared them with the IB outlet keyword. And then down here, we have already implemented the methods that the class delegates, okay? Settings view controller delegates. They're defined in this protocol here. So these methods are methods that can be implemented by any class, okay? And we're talking about the methods settings view controller, controller did finish with change, and change speed. Those are two methods. Now we got to add two action methods for the interface builder elements. And those are going to go in right here before this end statement. We're going to declare with IB action done method, and we're going to declare with IB action the speed changed method. Now we need to have the compiler create some accessor methods. These allow the specific instance variable of an object to be read and, if you want, updated, which is what we want to do. As you're well aware by now, creating accessor methods is a process that begins with the @property declaration, which tells the compiler there are accessor methods coming. And so we'll put in our @properties declarations here. Now, I've been using non-atomic a lot. I might as well explain now what it means. Non-atomic tells the compiler to create an accessor to return the value directly, which is another way of saying that the accessors can be interrupted while in use. And this works fine for apps like this one. We're also going to use assign. Assign tells the compiler to create an accessor method that sends an assigned message to any object that's assigned to this property. These are attributes that provide the compiler with information about exactly how you want the accessor methods to work. So that, and we use the settings view controller delegate, and we want the @property UI slider as well. Well, these warnings here are probably telling us that we require property delegate requires method delegate to be defined. Use synthesize. We're going to do that in a minute. So that's okay for that one. Use synthesize. We're going to do that in settings view controller in just a minute. This one here, protocol qualifiers without id is archaic. We'll allow the compiler to fix it. Now that was a preview of what it's like to do some quick debugging while coding. So we're going to deal with these two warnings right now by jumping over to settingsviewcontroller.m, the implementation file, which of course has its own warning saying it's incomplete. Well, we know that because we need to add the synthesize statements at the very least. So we're going to add the synthesize statement right here, slider and delegate. Now that won't get rid of this warning because we still need to add some methods. We're going to need to add methods for the interface objects, and that's what we're going to do next.